The roar of the wind drowned out everything else. A deep and terrible sound like the earth itself was screaming. And Aiden Lancaster threw himself toward the figure stumbling across his field, just as the funnel cloud touched down less than a mile away. She was massive, this woman, taller than any human he had ever seen, with shoulders broad enough to carry a yoke and legs that churned through his half-grown wheat like pistons. Her skin was the color of spring moss, vivid even in the sickly green light that preceded the storm, and when she turned her face toward him in surprise, he saw the unmistakable curve of tusks rising from her lower jaw. An orc. Aiden had maybe 3 seconds to decide whether to leave her to the mercy of the twister or save her life. His hand was already reaching for her before his mind caught up, fingers closing around a wrist thick as a fence post. "Root Cellar," he shouted, though the wind tore the words away. He pulled, and to his shock, she came, trusting him enough in that moment of terror to follow a complete stranger. They ran together across the churned earth, her longer stride forcing him to sprint to keep pace, while behind them the tornado's roar grew to a volume that made thought impossible. The cellar doors were already open, flapping wildly in the gale. Aiden practically threw himself down the stairs, still gripping the orc woman's wrist, and she tumbled after him into the darkness. He kicked at one of the heavy wooden doors and it slammed shut with a bang that he felt more than heard. The second door resisted, caught by the wind, and suddenly her hands were beside his, green fingers splayed against weathered wood, and together they forced it closed. The bar dropped into place just as something massive struck the doors from above. The entire cellar shuddered. Dust rained down from between the floorboards of his house, and Aiden found himself pressed against the far wall with an orc woman he had never met crouched beside him in the pitch darkness. For a moment, there was only the sound of the storm. The screaming wind, the crash and crack of things breaking, the deep bass rumble that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The cellar doors rattled in their frame but held firm. His grandfather had built this shelter to last, had dug it deep and lined it with stone, and Aiden sent up a silent prayer of thanks to the old man. Then he became aware of breathing beside him, fast and harsh, and he realized the orc woman was terrified. "It will pass," he said, though he had no idea if she could hear him. "These storms, they move fast. We just have to wait." No response, but the breathing evened out slightly. He wished desperately for light, for some way to see her face, to gauge whether she understood him or whether she thought he had trapped her here to do her harm. His hand fumbled along the shelf he knew was mounted to his right, fingers searching for the lantern he kept there and the matches beside it. The match flared bright enough to make them both flinch. In its brief light, he saw her clearly for the first time. A woman perhaps in her middle 20s, with a strong jaw and high cheekbones, dark hair pulled back in a braid thick as his arm. Her eyes were amber, catching the light like a cat's, and they were wide with fear. She wore traveling clothes, all leather and rough woven fabric, and she had a pack slung across her back that looked like it held everything she owned. Then the match burned his fingers and he dropped it with a curse, plunging them back into darkness. The second match lasted long enough for him to get the lantern lit. Warm yellow light filled the small space, pushing back the shadows, revealing the shelves of preserved food, the water barrel, the spare tools and blankets he kept down here. The orc woman had pressed herself against the wall opposite him, making herself as small as someone her size could manage. Her eyes tracked his every movement. "I am not going to hurt you," Aiden said clearly. "You are safe here." She stared at him for a long moment, then spoke in a voice deeper than any human woman's but no less feminine for it. "Why did you help me?" Her accent was thick, rolling the consonants in a way that suggested Common was not her first language, but her words were clear enough. Why would I not? Aiden asked, genuinely puzzled. I am orc, she said, as if this explained everything, and perhaps it did. He had heard the stories, the tales of violence and hatred between their peoples. Had even seen some of it himself, though not here in this isolated valley where he had made his home these past 3 years. You are a person, Aiden said, and there is a tornado up there that does not care what color your skin is. Above them, something heavy crashed into the house. The whole structure groaned and dust poured down through the cracks. The orc woman's hands clenched into fists, but she did not cry out. Aiden found himself admiring that, her composure in the face of terror. I am Aiden Lancaster, he offered, thinking that perhaps names might make this less strange. She was quiet for so long he thought she would not answer. Then softly, Grisha. Well met, Grisha, though I wish it were under better circumstances. That startled a sound out of her that might have been a laugh, though it was gone too quickly for him to be sure. The storm raged on above them, and they settled in to wait. Time moved strangely in the darkness. The lantern cast dancing shadows on the stone walls, and Aiden found his eyes drawn again and again to the woman across from him. She was beautiful, he realized, in a way that had nothing to do with human standards. There was a strength to her features, a fierceness that spoke of survival and will. Her hands, though large and calloused, moved with surprising grace when she finally unslung her pack and set it beside her. How long? She asked eventually. The storm. Could be minutes, could be an hour. Hard to say. He paused, then added, You are welcome to stay until it is safe. Longer if you need shelter. Her amber eyes narrowed. Why? Does there need to be a reason? Always there is a reason. Her accent grew thicker when she was agitated, he noticed. Humans do not help orcs. Orcs do not trust humans. This is how the world works. Maybe the world is wrong, Aiden said quietly. She looked at him like he had sprouted a second head. Above them, the roar of the wind was beginning to subside, though the rain still hammered against what remained of his house. He could hear water dripping, which meant the roof had taken damage. He tried not to think about how much that would cost to repair. You live here alone? Grisha asked, her eyes roaming over the shelves of preserved vegetables, the single blanket folded in the corner. I do. Have a small farm, grow wheat and vegetables mostly. Keep some chickens, though I imagine they are scattered halfway across the county by now. He tried to keep his voice light, but the reality of what he would find when they emerged was starting to sink in. You are far from other humans. That is rather the point. I came here for the quiet. Running from something? The question was blunt, direct in the way he was learning was characteristic of her. Running towards something, he corrected. Peace. A life that is my own. I spent 10 years in the king's army. Saw enough of war and death and orders from men who did not care whether I lived or died. When my service ended, I took my pay and I came here. Grisha was quiet for a moment, processing this. You are soldier, she said finally, and there was new wariness in her voice. Was a soldier. Now I am a farmer. Soldiers killed my father, she said flatly. Human soldiers wearing your king's colors. They burned our village because we lived too close to the border. I was 10 summers old. The words hung in the air between them like a blade. Aiden felt them lodge somewhere behind his breastbone, sharp and accusing. He had worn those colors. He had followed orders. He had never burned a village, but he had done things in the name of duty that he would carry for the rest of his life. I am sorry, he said, and meant it with everything in him. I am sorry that happened to you. I am sorry for every pointless act of cruelty that has ever been done in the name of borders and kings, and all the other things that divide people who should not be enemies. She studied him with those amber eyes, and he felt the weight of her judgment. Whatever she saw must have satisfied something, because she nodded once, sharply. "You mean this?" she said, surprised. "I do." The storm was definitely passing now. The wind had dropped to a strong blow rather than a howl, and the rain was steady rather than torrential. Aiden could hear things settling, the groan of stressed wood, the drip and trickle of water finding new paths. He did not want to think about what his house looked like. "We should wait a little longer," he said. "Sometimes these storms come in groups. Better to be certain." Grisha nodded and pulled her pack into her lap, unlacing the top to rummage inside. She produced a water skin and took a long drink, then offered it to him. The gesture was oddly intimate, this sharing of water in the aftermath of disaster. Aiden accepted it with a nod of thanks and drank. The water was cool and clean, with a faint taste of leather. "Where were you going?" he asked, handing it back. "When the storm hit?" "West," she said simply. "Away from my clan's lands, away from the fighting." "There is fighting." This was news to him. Out here in his isolated valley, word traveled slowly. Always there is fighting. The clans war with each other and sometimes with humans. "My clan's chief wants to raid across the border, take human lands. I said this was foolish, that it would bring only death." Her jaw tightened and he saw old anger there. "He said I was weak, said I had no stomach for glory, so I left." "That takes courage," Aiden said quietly. "To walk away from everything you know." She shrugged, a rolling motion of those powerful shoulders. "It takes courage to stay and watch everyone you love die for pride. I chose the coward's path. You chose the wise path. There is no glory in dying for nothing." "You say this, but you were soldier." "Which is how I know it is true." He met her eyes. "I have seen brave men die because of stupid orders. I have watched good people bleed out in mud for the sake of moving a border a few feet in one direction or another. Glory is what people who have never fought call waste and tragedy." Grisha was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "You are strange human, Aiden Lancaster." "I get that a lot," he said with a small smile. She almost smiled back. He saw the corners of her mouth twitch, the way her eyes lightened fractionally. Then she caught herself and the moment was gone, but it had been there. That tiny moment of connection. The rain had slowed to a drizzle. Aiden judged it safe enough to venture out and see what remained of his life's work. He stood, joints protesting after sitting on cold stone, and reached for the bar that held the cellar doors closed. "Wait," Grisha said, rising to her feet as well. She was tall, topping him by a good 6 inches, and in the confined space of the cellar she seemed even larger. "I will go first, in case there is danger." "It is my house," Aiden protested, "and you saved my life. I will not let you walk into danger alone." There was no arguing with the set of her jaw. Aiden stepped aside and let her take the lead, though he kept close behind her as she lifted the bar and pushed open one of the doors. The destruction was worse than he had feared. His house was simply gone, reduced to scattered boards and broken beams. The barn had collapsed in on itself, and he could see the gleam of twisted metal where his plow had been thrown into the fence line. The wheat field was flattened, the young plants torn from the earth and scattered like straw. Everything he had built over 3 years of hard labor was destroyed. Aiden stood in the rain and stared at the ruins of his life. He should feel something, he thought distantly. Rage, grief, despair. But there was only a strange numbness, a sense of unreality that made the destruction feel like someone else's problem. "Aiden." Grisha's voice was gentle, which somehow made it worse. "I am sorry. It is just things," he heard himself say. "Things can be rebuilt." But even as he spoke, he was calculating. The money he had saved would not be enough to rebuild the house and the barn. He would have to choose. And winter was coming, which meant he needed shelter. The barn could wait. But without equipment, without a plow, how would he work the fields next year? How would he eat? "You will rebuild," Grisha said firmly, as if she could hear his spiraling thoughts. "You are young, you are strong. You will rebuild." He wanted to believe her. Instead, he walked forward into the wreckage, searching for anything that might be salvaged. His good axe was embedded in what had been the barn wall, and he worked it free with effort. A few tools had survived in the lean-to beside the house, which had somehow escaped the worst of the destruction. His winter stores were in the cellar, so at least he would not starve immediately. Small mercies. Grisha moved through the wreckage with him, her keen eyes spotting things he's missed. She found his spare knife, his good cooking pot, a blanket that had somehow stayed dry tangled in the remains of his bed. She said nothing, just gathered the items into a pile and stood guard over them while he continued his salvage operation. The chickens were indeed scattered. He found 3 of them huddled under a fallen tree, their feathers bedraggled but otherwise unharmed. He scooped them up and deposited them in the overturned water trough, which would hold them for now. The others were either dead or had fled far enough that he would never find them. By the time the sun broke through the clouds, they had assembled a small pile of salvageable goods. It was pathetically little compared to what he had lost, but it was something. Aiden sat down on a broken beam and put his head in his hands. The numbness was wearing off, and beneath it was a howling void of despair that threatened to swallow him whole. He had come here to build a life, to find peace, and in the span of an hour it had all been torn away. A shadow fell over him. Grisha stood there, her expression unreadable. "You should go," Aiden said dully. "West, like you were planning. No reason to stay in this mess and leave you here alone." She sounded almost offended. "You are hurt. I am fine. You have blood on your face and you are limping. You are hurt," she repeated, brooking no argument. She crouched beside him, bringing them closer to eye level, and reached out slowly as if approaching a spooked animal. Her fingers were surprisingly gentle as they tilted his face toward the light. "Cut on your forehead. Not deep, but it should be cleaned." "I can manage," he protested weakly. "Sit still." She produced a cloth from somewhere and wet it with water from her skin, then dabbed at the wound with a care that seemed at odds with her warrior's build. Aiden held still and tried not to think about how close she was, about the way her amber eyes narrowed in concentration, about the surprising warmth of her hands. "There," she said finally, sitting back on her heels. "You will live." "Lucky me," he said, without much enthusiasm. Grisha was quiet for a moment, then she made a decision. He could see it happen, the way her shoulders squared and her jaw set. "I will help you," she announced. "What? Rebuild? I will help you rebuild." She gestured around at the destruction. "You saved my life, I have debt to you. And you need help, so I will stay and help, and then the debt is paid." Aiden stared at her. "You do not owe me anything. I did what anyone would do." "You did what no one else would do," she corrected. "Humans see orc in danger, they laugh. They cheer for the storm. You pulled me to safety. So now I help you." Her tone suggested the matter was settled, that argument would be futile. "People will talk," Aiden said weakly. "A human man and an orc woman living together out here. Let them talk. I do not care what humans think of me. Do you care what they think of you?" Did he? Aiden thought about the few neighbors he had, scattered across the valley. He traded with them occasionally, exchanged help during harvest time, but he would not call any of them friends. He had come here specifically to be alone, to escape the judgment and expectations of others. "No," he admitted. "I suppose I do not." "Then it is settled." Grisha stood and offered him a hand. After a moment's hesitation, Aiden took it and let her pull him to his feet. Her grip was strong enough to lift him with ease. "Come." We should check you for other injuries, then make camp for the night. Tomorrow we start rebuilding." She was right, of course. Shock was setting in and his leg was definitely injured, though he had no memory of hurting it. The immediate priority was shelter and rest. Everything else could wait for morning. They made their way back to the cellar, which was at least dry and secure. Grisha insisted on examining his leg, which turned out to be badly bruised but not broken. He had twisted his ankle at some point, probably in the mad dash across the field. She wrapped it with strips of cloth torn from one of his ruined shirts, her hands impersonal and efficient. "You have done this before," Aiden observed. "I have 6 brothers," she said, "and 4 sisters. Always someone is injured in a family that size. I learned to set bones before I learned to read." "Can you read?" She gave him a look that suggested he had said something insulting. "Of course I can read. I am not savage." "I did not mean to imply I know," she sighed. "It's just, humans always assume. Assume we are stupid, assume we are violent, assume we know nothing but war and blood. I am sorry, you are right. I should not have assumed anything." Grisha finished with his ankle and sat back. "You are strange human," she said again, but this time there was something almost warm in her voice. "You apologize too much." "Better than not enough," Aiden said. She conceded this with a tilt of her head. They had salvaged enough food for a meal, some dried meat, some hard bread, vegetables from the cellar stores. It was not much, but Grisha proved surprisingly skilled at cooking over the small fire Aiden built in a pot. She had spices in her pack that transformed the simple ingredients into something that actually tasted good. They ate in companionable silence as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was beautiful, and it felt wrong that something so beautiful should exist on the same day his life had fallen apart. "Tell me about your family," Aiden said eventually, wanting to fill the silence with something other than his own thoughts. Grisha's expression softened. "My mother is strong, strongest woman I know. She held our family together after father died, kept us safe, kept us fed. My brothers are warriors, loud and proud and stupid in the way young men are stupid. My sisters are smarter. 3 are married, 1 is training to be shaman. And you, I am the one who left." She poked at the fire with a stick. "I am the one who could not stay and watch them throw their lives away for pride. The chief will lead them to war and they will follow and they will die, and I cannot watch it happen." "They may survive," Aiden offered. "Some will, but not all, and the ones who survive will be changed. War changes everyone." She looked at him meaningfully. "You know this." He did. He knew it in the nightmares that still woke him some nights, in the way loud noises made him flinch, in the scars that crossed his back and arms. War left marks that went deeper than flesh. "Do you miss them?" He asked. "Every day, but I cannot go back. I made my choice." They fell quiet again. Grisha banked the fire for the night and spread her bedroll on one side of the cellar. Aiden took the other, though sleep felt impossible. His mind kept returning to the destroyed house, to all the work that lay ahead, to the improbability of this strange woman who had appeared out of a storm and decided to stay. "Aiden," her voice came soft through the darkness. "Yes, thank you, for pulling me into the cellar. For not leaving me to the storm. You do not need to thank me. I do, because you are right. Most would have left me. You did not. That means something." Aiden did not know what to say to that, so he said nothing. Eventually, her breathing evened out into the rhythm of sleep. He lay awake much longer, staring at the darkness and wondering what he had gotten himself into. Morning came gray and drizzly, the storm's final farewell. Aiden's ankle was swollen and painful, but Grisha had wrapped it well and it bore his weight if he was careful. They emerged from the cellar to face the destruction in full daylight, and it looked no better than it had the evening before. "We start with shelter," Grisha announced, taking charge with the ease of someone used to organizing others. "We build simple structure enough to keep rain off our heads. Then we work on rest. I should see what lumber can be salvaged," Aiden said, gesturing at the ruins of his house. "I will do that. You rest your ankle." "I cannot just sit while you work. You cannot rebuild anything if you cripple yourself permanently," she interrupted. "Rest today. Tomorrow you will be stronger and we work together. But today I work and you direct. You know this land, you know what is needed. Tell me, and I will do." There was no arguing with her. Aiden lowered himself onto the cellar's stone steps and watched as Grisha set to work. She was magnificent in motion, all power and efficiency. She could lift beams that would have required 2 men, could pull apart tangled wreckage with her bare hands. Within an hour, she had sorted the salvageable lumber into neat piles and identified the largest pieces that could serve as the frame for a temporary shelter. "There," she said, pointing to a relatively clear spot near the cellar. "We build there. Good choice. Close to water, good drainage, protected from the north wind." She nodded and began hauling lumber. Aiden directed her as best he could, but the truth was she needed little guidance. She had built before, that much was clear from the competence with which she measured and cut and fitted boards together. By midday, the skeleton of a simple structure was taking shape, nothing fancy, just 4 walls and a roof, but it would be warm and dry. "You are a carpenter as well as a warrior?" Aiden asked during their brief pause for lunch. Grisha shrugged. "In my clan, everyone builds. We do not stay in one place, so we must know how to make shelter quickly. I have built houses, barns, fences. Is not difficult, just work. You make it look easy. Is easy when you are strong." She flexed an arm and he could see the muscles bunch beneath her skin. "Orc women are strong, stronger than human men usually." "I had noticed," Aiden said dryly. She grinned, and he was struck again by how the expression transformed her. When she smiled, she went from intimidating to beautiful in an instant. Her tusks caught the light, white against green, and her eyes sparkled with amusement. "You are not offended. Some human men are offended when women are stronger." "Some human men are idiots," Aiden said. "I spent enough time in the army to know that strength comes in many forms. I knew women who could not lift half what I could, but they could march twice as far without complaining. Knew men who were weak as kittens but could plan a battle that saved hundreds of lives. Strength is strength. I am not so insecure that I need to be the strongest person in every room." Grisha considered this. "You are very strange human," she said for the 3rd time, but now there was definite warmth in the words. They worked through the afternoon, Grisha doing the heavy labor while Aiden sorted through salvage and made lists of what they would need. It was a long list. Nails, tar paper for the roof, glass for windows if he wanted them, tools to replace the ones that were lost or broken, seed for next year's planting. A new plow, though that would have to wait. The temporary shelter took shape with surprising speed. By the time the sun set, the walls were up and the roof was on, rough and unfinished but functional. Grisha had even fashioned a door from salvaged planks, hanging it on leather hinges that would do until he could get proper hardware. "Tomorrow we make it better," she said, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Add insulation, make it weatherproof. But tonight we sleep above ground." They moved their meager possessions into the new shelter. It was cramped with both of them inside, barely larger than the cellar, but it was clean and dry and smelled of fresh-cut wood. Aiden felt something loosen in his chest, a knot of tension he had not realized he was carrying. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for all of this. I could not have done it without you." Grisha looked uncomfortable with the praise. "Is just work, you would do the same for me." "I would try. but I doubt I could build a shelter in a single day. You would find a way. You are resourceful." She settled onto her bedroll, which took up most of one side of the small space. "Now sleep. Tomorrow we have more work." But Aiden found himself reluctant to let the silence fall. "Can I ask you something?" "Ask." "Why were you really traveling west? You said you were fleeing the fighting, but—" "You do not strike me as someone who runs from things." Grisha was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I am tired," she said finally. "Tired of fighting, tired of hating, tired of watching people I love turn into monsters for the sake of glory. My youngest brother, he is only 15 summers. The chief wants to send him on raids, wants to make him a warrior." She paused. "He is gentle soul, he loves poetry and music. War will break him, and I cannot stay and watch it happen." "So you left to save yourself the pain of watching?" "Perhaps. Or perhaps I left because I am a coward who could not face the fight." Her voice turned bitter. "My mother thinks so. She said I am disgrace to the family, said true orc would stay and fight, would die if necessary to protect the clan. And what do you think?" "I think there are many ways to protect the people you love, and I think dying for pride is not protection, is waste." She rolled onto her side, facing the wall. "But maybe she is right. Maybe I am just coward." "You are not a coward," Aiden said firmly. "You are someone who values life over glory. That is wisdom, not cowardice. You say this because you do not know orcish ways. I say this because I have seen enough death to know that it should mean something. Your brother dying on a raid that accomplishes nothing would be a waste. You leaving to preserve yourself, to build a different life, to show that there is another path that is not cowardice. That is courage." Grisha did not respond, but he thought he heard her breathing hitch slightly, as if she were holding back tears. He left her to her privacy and settled onto his own bedroll, exhausted in body and spirit. Sleep came easier than he expected, and for the first time in months, he did not dream of war. The days that followed fell into a pattern. They rose with the sun and worked until their bodies demanded rest. Grisha proved endlessly capable. She could frame a wall, thatch a roof, dig a drainage ditch, all with the same calm efficiency. Aiden contributed what he could, his ankle healing slowly but surely, and found that they worked well together. She anticipated his needs, he understood her methods, and between them they accomplished more than he would have thought possible. The temporary shelter became more permanent. They added a proper fireplace, using stones salvaged from the old house's foundation. They insulated the walls with mud and straw, making it weatherproof. They even managed to salvage enough glass from the wreckage to create one small window, which Grisha installed with a care that surprised him. "I like windows," she said when he commented on it. "I like to see the sky." In the evenings, they cooked together and talked. Grisha told him about her childhood, about growing up in a clan always on the move, about learning to hunt and fight and survive in a world that saw her people as monsters. Aiden told her about his own past, about growing up on a farm not unlike this one, about the hunger for adventure that had driven him to join the army, about the disillusionment that had eventually driven him out. "I thought it would be glorious," he admitted one night. "Thought I would be a hero, protecting people from dangers. Instead, I was just a tool, a weapon that someone else aimed and fired. And when I finally understood what I was being used for, it was too late. I had already done things I cannot take back." "What kind of things?" Grisha asked quietly. Aiden stared into the fire. "We burned villages, killed people who were just trying to live their lives. I told myself I was following orders, that it was necessary, that our cause was just. But the truth is I was a coward who did not have the courage to say no." "And when did you find that courage?" "Not soon enough. There was a village on the border of orcish lands. We were told it was a military target that they were harboring raiders. When we got there, he swallowed hard. It was families, children, people who had nothing to do with any war. And my captain ordered us to. He could not finish the sentence. Grisha said nothing, just waited. I refused, Aiden said finally. First time in 10 years I refused an order, told him I would not murder children. He threatened to hang me for insubordination, but enough of the other men agreed with me that he backed down. We left the village standing, but I knew then that I could not stay, could not keep following orders from men who saw slaughter as strategy. So you left, as soon as my service was up. Took my pay and came here as far from the fighting as I could get. Thought maybe I could atone somehow, by building instead of destroying, by growing things instead of killing them. And has it worked? Do you feel atoned? Aiden considered the question. No, he said honestly. I do not think atonement works that way. The things I did are still done. The people I hurt are still hurt. All I can do is try to be better now than I was then. Grisha nodded slowly. This is wise, she said. My mother used to say that we cannot unmake the past, but we can choose what we make of the future. Your mother sounds like a wise woman. She is. She is also stubborn and proud and convinced that her way is the only way, but she is wise. They fell into comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Outside, the wind picked up, but the walls Grisha had built held firm. The fire crackled and popped, and Aiden found himself watching the play of firelight across her face, the way it made her skin glow bronze green, the way her eyes reflected the flames. She was beautiful. The thought had been growing in his mind for days now, but this was the first time he allowed himself to acknowledge it fully. Not beautiful in the way human women were beautiful, but beautiful nonetheless. There was a strength to her that called to something deep in his chest, a competence and capability that made him feel safe in a way he had not felt since he was a child. He was developing feelings for her. The realization should have alarmed him, but instead it settled over him like a comfortable blanket. Of course he had feelings for her. How could he not? She had appeared out of a storm and helped him rebuild his life. She was kind and strong and wise and funny. She challenged him and comforted him and made him want to be better than he was. The fact that she was an orc should matter. The fact that their peoples had been enemies for generations should matter. But here, in the warmth of the fire she had helped him build, in the shelter she had constructed with her own hands, none of that seemed to matter at all. You are staring, Grisha said without looking at him. Aiden blinked, caught. Sorry, I was just thinking. About, he should lie. Should make up something innocuous. Instead, he found himself saying, about how glad I am that you stayed. Now she did look at him, her amber eyes searching his face. You are. I am. You have helped me more than I can say, not just with the rebuilding, but... He struggled for words. You remind me that there is good in the world, that not everything is broken beyond repair. Grisha's expression was unreadable. You give me too much credit. I am just orc who did not want to be alone. You are more than that, much more. Aiden, she stopped, seeming to wrestle with something. You should not say such things. Why not? Because I will leave. When the rebuilding is done, when the debt is paid, I will go west as I planned. You know this. Did he? Aiden realized he had been avoiding thinking about that inevitability. Had been letting himself pretend that this strange partnership might continue indefinitely. What if I asked you to stay? The words were out before he could stop them. Grisha went very still. Why would you ask such a thing? Because I do not want you to leave, because he took a breath. Because I care about you. Because working beside you these past days has been the happiest I have been in longer than I can remember. Because when I think about you leaving, I feel like I am losing something precious. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you are kind and strong and brave. I know you make me laugh. I know I feel more alive when you are near than I have felt in years. Is that not enough? Grisha stood abruptly, moving to the window to stare out at the night. Her shoulders were tense, her hands clenched into fists. You do not understand what you are asking, she said, her voice tight. You are human, I am orc, our peoples are enemies. If I stay here, people will talk. They will say terrible things about you, about us. They may drive you out or worse. Let them talk, I do not care. You should care. You have built a life here. You have neighbors, trade relationships, a place in this valley. If you take up with an orc woman, you will lose all of that. Then I will lose it. It would be worth it. She spun to face him, her eyes blazing. You say that now. But what about in a year when you are alone except for me? When no one will trade with you, when children throw stones at your house, when you are shunned by your own kind? Will it still be worth it then? Yes, Aiden said simply. Because I would have you. Grisha made a sound that might have been a sob or a laugh. You are fool, probably. But I am a fool who knows what he wants. And what do you want, Aiden Lancaster? He stood, crossing the small space to stand before her. She was taller, but he met her eyes without flinching. I want you to stay. I want to wake up every morning knowing you are here. I want to build a life with you, a real life, not just a temporary partnership. I want, he stopped, overwhelmed by the enormity of what he was feeling. I want you to know that you are wanted. Not just for your strength or your skill, but for who you are. I want you to have a home that is yours, not because of debt, but because you choose it. Because you choose. He could not quite say me, but the word hung in the air between them nonetheless. Grisha was crying. Tears tracked down her green cheeks, catching the firelight, and she seemed unable to stop them. You do not know what you are offering, she whispered. You do not know what it means to be orc woman in human lands. The stares, the whispers, the fear. The constant knowledge that you are other, that you do not belong. Then we will be other together, Aiden said, and we will build a place where we do belong. She shook her head, but there was less conviction in the gesture. It is not so simple. Nothing worthwhile ever is. Aiden, stay, he said again, and this time he let all the longing he felt color the word. Please, stay. For a long moment she just looked at him. Then slowly she reached out and took his hand in both of hers. Her hands were huge and calloused and warm, and they enfolded his completely. I am afraid, she admitted softly, afraid to hope for this, afraid it will be taken away. I am afraid too, Aiden said. Afraid I am not enough, that I will fail you somehow, but I think the fear means it matters, means it is real. Grisha nodded slowly. I will stay, she said finally, the words barely audible. I will stay and we will see what comes. Relief and joy flooded through him in equal measure. He wanted to pull her into his arms, to kiss her, to do all the things that lovers did. But something held him back, the knowledge that this was new and fragile, that moving too fast might shatter it. Instead, he squeezed her hands gently. Thank you, he said. She smiled through her tears. You are still strange human, Aiden Lancaster. And you are remarkable woman, Grisha. They stood there for a long moment, hands clasped, and Aiden felt the world shift around them. Whatever came next, they would face it together. That was enough. More than enough. That night they slept on opposite sides of the small shelter as always, but something had changed. The air felt charged with possibility, with promise. Aiden lay awake for a long time, listening to Grisha's breathing, thinking about the future that lay before them. The weeks that followed were both easier and harder than Aiden had expected. Easier because Grisha's presence made every task lighter, every burden more bearable. Harder because he was constantly aware of her, of the way she moved, the sound of her voice, the rare smiles that lit up her face. He wanted more than friendship, wanted to close the distance between them, but he held back. She had agreed to stay, but that did not mean she wanted what he wanted. They worked on the farm, preparing for winter. The temporary shelter would not be enough once the snows came, so they began work on a proper house. This time, Aiden was more involved in the labor, his ankle fully healed and his strength returning. They worked side by side, measuring and cutting and fitting boards together, and Aiden found himself marveling at how well they complemented each other. "You are a good teacher," Grisha said one afternoon as they framed a wall together. "Patient, clear. You make things easy to understand." "You are the one doing most of the work," Aiden pointed out. "Work is easy. Knowing what work to do, that is the trick." She paused to wipe sweat from her brow. "In my clan, I was always the one who planned. My brothers and sisters would act, but I would think ahead. Figure out what was needed, what could go wrong, how to prepare. I thought it made me weak, but maybe it is just different strength." "It is definitely a strength. Half the disasters I have seen could have been avoided with better planning. This is what I tried to tell the chief. But he only valued warriors, said thinking was for old men and women that true orcs acted." She shook her head. "Fool." They raised the wall together, fitting it into place with practiced ease. The house was taking shape, larger than the temporary shelter, with a separate sleeping area and a proper kitchen. Aiden had even designed it with 2 bedrooms, though he was not sure if Grisha understood why. He told himself it was just practical, that they would need the space, but the truth was he was already imagining a future that might require such considerations. Trade with the neighbors was complicated. Word had spread that Aiden had an orc woman living with him, and reactions were mixed. Some refused to deal with him anymore, crossing to the other side of the road when they saw him in the village. Others were merely curious, keeping their distance but not outright hostile. The worst was Jacob Miller, a farmer whose land bordered Aiden's to the south. He arrived one afternoon with 3 of his sons, all of them armed, and demanded to speak with Aiden. "Heard you got yourself an orc," Jacob said, his hand resting on the knife at his belt. "Thought we should come see for ourselves." Aiden felt Grisha tense beside him. She was armed as well. She had found her war axe in the wreckage of the first day and had taken to wearing it on her belt, and he could tell she was ready for violence. "This is Grisha," Aiden said calmly. "She is my business partner. We are rebuilding the farm together." "Business partner." Jacob's tone made it clear what he thought of that. "You expect us to believe that? I do not care what you believe. This is my land and Grisha is welcome here." "She is orc," one of Jacob's sons spat. "Orcs killed my uncle, burned his farm to the ground." "And humans killed her father," Aiden said quietly. "Burned her village to the ground. The cycle of violence has to stop somewhere." "Why not here?" Jacob shook his head. "You have gone soft, Lancaster. Army must have broken something in you. No sane man would take up with an orc." "Then I suppose I am not sane. Now get off my land." For a tense moment, it could have gone either way. Jacob's hand tightened on his knife and his sons spread out, flanking them. Aiden kept his own hand near his belt, where his own knife hung, and beside him he felt Grisha shift into a fighting stance. Then Jacob seemed to deflate. "You are a fool," he said, "but it is your life to ruin. Just keep that thing away from my land." They left, and Aiden let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. Grisha's hand was shaking slightly as she lowered it from her axe. "This will not be the last time," she said quietly. "I know. They will come back, maybe with more men, maybe with torches. Let them come. This is our land, and I will defend it." Grisha looked at him with an expression he could not read. "You would fight your own people for me. You are my people now," Aiden said simply. "You and anyone else who chooses kindness over hate." She said nothing, but later that night he woke to find her sitting by the fire staring into the flames. He joined her, wrapping a blanket around his shoulders against the autumn chill. "Cannot sleep?" he asked. "Thinking," she said. "About what Jacob said. About whether I should leave before someone gets hurt." "No." The word came out sharper than he intended. "No, you are not leaving. We talked about this. We talked before your neighbors came with knives, before you had to choose between me and them. There is no choice. I choose you. I will always choose you." "Why?" Her voice was anguished. "Why would you throw away everything for an orc you barely know?" "Because you are not just any orc. You are Grisha. You are the woman who helped me rebuild when I had nothing, who makes me laugh, who challenges me to be better, who makes me feel less alone." He took a breath. "Because I am in love with you." The words hung in the air between them. Grisha stared at him, her amber eyes wide with shock. "You? What?" "I love you," Aiden said again, more firmly this time. "I have been in love with you since the day you insisted on going up the cellar stairs first to protect me. Maybe even before that. And I know it is foolish, and I know it complicates everything, but it is the truth. I love you, and I do not care who knows it." Grisha was crying again, silent tears that tracked down her face. "You cannot love me. We are too different. It is impossible. And yet I do." "Aiden," she stopped, struggling with something. "If I stay, if we do this, there is no going back. You will be marked for the rest of your life as orc lover. You will lose standing in human society. Children you might have will be outcasts. There will be no easy path for us. I do not want easy, I want you. You are impossible," she whispered, but there was no anger in it, only wonder. "Is that a yes? To what? You have not asked a question." Aiden realized she was right. He had confessed his love but had not actually asked her anything. He considered dropping to one knee, making it formal, but that felt wrong. This was not a moment for grand gestures. This was something simpler and more profound. "You feel anything for me?" he asked instead. "Anything beyond friendship or gratitude?" Grisha was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I feel everything for you. It terrifies me." Hope bloomed in his chest, bright and fierce. "Everything? I think of you when I wake, when I sleep, when I work. I imagine what it would be like to touch you, to kiss you too." She stopped, flustered. "And then I remember what I am, and I know it is impossible. You deserve someone of your own kind, someone who will not bring you shame and danger. You could never bring me shame, and as for danger, we face that together or not at all." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and he saw the defenses crumbling behind her eyes. "You truly mean this?" "Every word." "Then I am yours," she said simply. "If you will have me, if you are certain this is what you want." In answer, Aiden closed the distance between them. He reached up, because even sitting she was taller, and cupped her face in his hands. Her skin was warm beneath his palms, smooth despite the calluses he knew covered her hands. He gave her time to pull away, to change her mind, but she only leaned into his touch, her eyes falling closed. When he kissed her, it felt like coming home. Her lips were warm and soft, her tusks smooth against his mouth. She made a small sound, almost a gasp, and then she was kissing him back with a passion that took his breath away. Her hands came up to grip his shoulders, careful of her strength, and he felt the leashed power in her touch. They broke apart eventually, both breathing hard. Grisha's eyes were bright with tears and joy in equal measure. "I never thought," she started, then stopped. "I never let myself hope for this." "Neither did I," Aiden admitted. "I came here to be alone. And then a tornado brought you to me, and everything changed." "Best tornado," Grisha said, and he laughed. They spent the rest of the night talking, wrapped in blankets by the fire, sharing all the things they had held back. Grisha told him about the depth of her loneliness, about the years of feeling like she did not fit anywhere. Aiden told her about his fears, about his nightmares, about the guilt that still haunted him. They held nothing back, and in the sharing, they built something stronger than stone. When dawn came, they rose together and went back to work on the house. But now there was new energy to their labor, a sense of building toward a future they would share. Grisha sang while she worked, old orcish songs in a language Aiden did not understand, and he found himself humming along with the melodies. The house came together piece by piece. They added a porch, wide enough for 2 chairs. They built a proper barn for the animals Aiden hoped to acquire come spring. They dug a well, because hauling water from the stream was getting old. Every nail they drove, every board they placed, was an act of faith in their shared future. Winter arrived early that year, bringing snow in thick blankets that covered the valley. They were ready for it. The house was tight and warm, the cellar was stocked with food, and they had enough firewood to last until spring. They spent the long evenings by the fire, Grisha teaching Aiden words in her language while he taught her to read and write in common. She learned quickly, her sharp mind picking up the letters with ease. "I want to write to my sister," she said one night, bent over a piece of precious paper. "The one who is training to be shaman. I want her to know I am well, that I have found a place." "Will she write back?" Aiden asked gently, aware of the pain that family might bring. "Maybe, maybe not, but I want her to know." The letter took 3 drafts before Grisha was satisfied. Aiden helped her with the grammar but let the words be her own. When it was finished, she sealed it with wax and addressed it to her sister in careful, precise letters. "How will you send it?" Aiden asked. "There is orc settlement 2 days west. They have traders who go east." "I will pay them to carry it." She hesitated. "Will you come with me?" "Of course." They set out a week later when the weather cleared. The journey was harder than Aiden expected, the snow deep and the cold bitter, but Grisha knew how to navigate winter terrain. She showed him how to read the signs, how to find the paths that game used, how to build a fire that would last through the night. The orc settlement was smaller than he expected, perhaps 20 buildings clustered in a valley. The orcs who lived there regarded him with suspicion and Grisha with something like pity. An elder approached them, her face lined with age, her tusks yellowed with time. "You are far from home, daughter," the elder said to Grisha in common, for Aiden's benefit. "I have found a new home," Grisha replied, her hand finding Aiden's. The elder's gaze flicked to their joined hands and understanding dawned. "Ah, I see. And you are happy with this choice?" "I am." "Then I will not judge. Love is rare enough in this world. If you have found it, hold tight." She accepted Grisha's letter and the coin to send it, then added, "You are welcome here if you ever need refuge. Both of you." It was more than Aiden had expected, and the kindness of it made his throat tight. They stayed the night, sleeping in a guest house that smelled of smoke and strange spices, and in the morning they began the journey home. "That was easier than I feared," Aiden admitted as they walked. "She is wise, that elder. Not all are like her. Many would have turned you away or worse." Grisha squeezed his hand. "But some are kind. Some understand that the old ways of hating do not serve us." Spring came slowly, melting the snow inch by inch. Aiden purchased new chickens and a cow with his remaining savings. Grisha cleared new fields for planting, her strength allowing them to expand beyond what Aiden could have managed alone. They worked together to plow and plant, and Aiden found himself cautiously hopeful as the first green shoots appeared. The neighbors remained wary but not actively hostile. A few even began to trade with them again, curiosity overcoming prejudice. The turning point came when Grisha helped deliver a calf for a neighboring farmer whose own cow was struggling. She had experience with such things from her time with her clan, and her quick action saved both mother and calf. After that, the whispers changed. They were still there, but now they were tinged with something other than pure disgust. Respect, perhaps, or at least acknowledgement that Grisha was more than the monster they had imagined. Summer arrived in a rush of heat and growth. The wheat grew tall and golden, and the vegetable garden overflowed with produce. They harvested together, working from dawn until dusk, and when the last sheaf was brought in, Aiden felt a satisfaction deeper than anything he had known in his military service. They had done this. Together. They had built something real and lasting. That night, lying in bed, they shared a room now, though they had kept the second bedroom for appearance's sake. When neighbors visited, Aiden turned to Grisha in the darkness. "Marry me," he said. He felt her go still beside him. "What? Marry me?" "I want you to be my wife. I want everyone to know that we are committed to each other, that this is permanent. I want," he struggled for the words, "I want to make it official, real." "It is already real," Grisha said softly. "I know, but I want the world to acknowledge it. I want there to be no question in anyone's mind that you are mine and I am yours." Grisha was quiet for a long time. "There is no priest who would perform such a ceremony," she said finally. "No church that would recognize a marriage between human and orc. Then we will find another way. We will make our own vows before witnesses who matter, or before no one but each other if that is what it takes." "Aiden, say yes," he pleaded. "Say you will be my wife." He felt her turn toward him in the darkness, felt her hand find his face. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you. I will be your wife, and you will be my husband, and we will make our own rules about how such things are done." Joy flooded through him, bright and fierce. He pulled her close and kissed her, trying to pour everything he felt into the contact. She responded with equal fervor, and they made love slowly and tenderly, sealing their promise to each other in the oldest way humans knew. They planned the ceremony for the autumn equinox, when the harvest was complete and the valley was at its most beautiful. Aiden sent word to the few neighbors who had shown them kindness, and Grisha sent another letter to her sister. They did not expect many to come, but that was all right. This was for them, not for anyone else. The day arrived cool and clear, the sky a brilliant blue unmarred by clouds. They had chosen a spot near the stream where wildflowers grew in profusion, and the water sang over smooth stones. Aiden wore his best clothes, carefully mended and cleaned. Grisha wore a dress she had made herself, dyed a deep forest green that brought out the richness of her skin. To their surprise, nearly 20 people gathered to witness. Some were neighbors, come out of curiosity or cautious goodwill. Some were orcs from the settlement to the west, including the kind elder who had taken Grisha's letter. And standing at the back, almost hidden in the shadows, was a young orc woman who could only be Grisha's sister. Grisha gasped when she saw her, and tears sprang to her eyes. She broke away from Aiden and ran to the girl, pulling her into a fierce embrace. They spoke rapidly in their own language, too fast for Aiden to follow, and when they finally pulled apart, both were crying. "This is Nara," Grisha said, leading her sister forward. "She is shaman in training. She has agreed to perform the ceremony." Nara was smaller than Grisha, more delicate in build, but she carried herself with quiet authority. She bowed to Aiden, a gesture of respect, and he returned it. "My sister has told me of you," Nara said, her common excellent. "She says you are a kind man who sees beyond the surface. I am honored to bind you together." The ceremony was beautiful in its simplicity. Nara spoke of the bonds that tied people together, of love and commitment and the choice to build a life side by side. She asked them to make their vows, and Aiden spoke first. "I, Aiden Lancaster, take you, Grisha, as my wife. I promise to stand beside you in joy and sorrow, in plenty and want. I promise to honor you, to respect you, to love you for all the days of my life. I promise to be your partner, your friend, your safe harbor in any storm. This I swear before all gathered here, and before the gods who watch." Grisha's voice was thick with emotion when she spoke her own vows. "I, Grisha, take you, Aiden Lancaster, as my husband. I promise to protect you, to support you, to challenge you to be your best self. I promise to share your burdens and your joys, to build a life with you that is more than either of us could create alone. I promise to love you fiercely and without reservation, for all the days of my life. This I swear before my people and yours, and before the spirits who guide us." Nara bound their hands together with a length of silk, green and blue intertwined. "What was separate is now joined," she said. "What was lonely is now companioned. What was incomplete is now whole. You are married in the eyes of all who matter. Go forth and build your life together." The witnesses cheered, and Aiden pulled Grisha into a kiss that left them both breathless. When they finally broke apart, they were surrounded by well-wishers, both human and orc, offering congratulations and blessings. The celebration that followed was chaotic and joyful. Someone had brought a fiddle, and music filled the air. Orcs and humans danced together, the barriers between them softened by joy and celebration. Food appeared from seemingly nowhere: roasted meat, fresh bread, autumn fruits, dishes from both cultures that blended and complemented each other. Aiden danced with his wife, while the sun set in shades of orange and gold. Grisha laughed as he spun her, her strength allowing her to lift him off his feet, and the sound of her joy was the most beautiful thing he had ever heard. As the stars came out, Nara approached them again. "I must leave in the morning," she said. "Return to my training, but I wanted to tell you Mother was wrong. You did not abandon us, sister. You showed us a different way, and I think maybe it is a better way." Grisha embraced her sister again, holding her tight. "Be safe," she whispered. "And know that you always have a home here if you need it, as you have a home with the clan if you ever wish to return." Nara pulled back, smiling through tears. "But I think you will not. I think you have found where you belong." She was right. As the celebration wound down and the guests departed, Aiden and Grisha stood together under the stars, hands still bound with the silk cord that marked their marriage. This was where they belonged, together in this valley, building a life that defied the boundaries their peoples had drawn. The months that followed were not without challenges. There were still those who disapproved, who muttered about unnatural unions and the mixing of blood. There were difficult days when the prejudice felt overwhelming, when Grisha struggled with loneliness for her own kind, when Aiden questioned whether he had the strength to keep fighting for their right to exist as they were. But there were far more good days. Days when their farm flourished, when neighbors stopped by to trade and stayed to talk, when letters arrived from Nara telling them about changes in the clan. Small changes, perhaps, but changes nonetheless. Young orcs who were questioning the old hatreds. Humans who were willing to see beyond their fear. Winter came again, their second together, and with it came news that changed everything. Grisha was pregnant. The discovery filled them both with joy and terror in equal measure. A child born of their union would face challenges neither of them could fully imagine. Would the baby be more orc or more human? Would it be healthy? Would it be accepted by either people? "We will love it," Grisha said firmly, her hand resting on her still flat belly. "Whatever it is, however it looks, we will love it, and we will teach it to be strong, to be kind, to build bridges where others build walls." "Yes," Aiden agreed, covering her hand with his own. "We will raise it to be better than we are, to carry forward what we have started here." The pregnancy was difficult. Grisha's size meant the baby was large, and she struggled in the later months. Aiden tended her with careful devotion, bringing her food, rubbing her swollen feet, reading to her when she could not sleep. And when her time came, it was Nara who attended the birth, having arrived weeks early to be with her sister. The labor was long and hard, stretching through the night and into the next day. Aiden paced outside the bedroom, listening to Grisha's labored breathing, feeling helpless and terrified. What if something went wrong? What if he lost her? The thought was unbearable, but Grisha was strong. She had always been strong. And when the baby finally arrived, her cry of triumph mixed with the infant's first wail in a sound that Aiden would never forget. He was allowed in to find Grisha propped up in bed, exhausted and radiant, cradling a tiny bundle. The baby was perfect small for an orc but large for a human, with skin that was a pale green and ears that came to gentle points. Wisps of dark hair covered its head, and when it opened its eyes, they were amber like its mother's. "A daughter," Grisha said softly, gazing down at the infant with wonder. "We have a daughter." Aiden sank onto the bed beside them, unable to take his eyes off the tiny miracle in Grisha's arms. "She is beautiful," he whispered. "She is perfect," Grisha corrected. "And she will need a name." They had discussed names endlessly over the past months, but nothing had felt right. Now, looking at his daughter, Aiden knew what she should be called. "Hope," he said. "Her name is Hope." Grisha looked at him, tears shining in her eyes. "Yes," she agreed. "Hope. For everything she represents, for the future she will build." Nara blessed the baby in the orcish tradition, marking her forehead with ash and speaking words in a language Aiden did not understand but felt in his bones. Then she turned to them both. "You have done something impossible," she said. "You have created life where there should have been only division. You have built love where there was hate. This child will change the world if you give her the chance." "We will," Aiden promised. "We will give her every chance." The years that followed proved him right. Hope grew strong and healthy, a bridge between two worlds in her very existence. She had her mother's strength and her father's kindness, and she moved between the human and orc communities with an ease that neither parent could match. Where Grisha and Aiden had faced suspicion and prejudice, Hope met curiosity and gradual acceptance. Other couples followed their example. An orc man married a human woman in the village to the north. A mixed family moved into the settlement to the west. The changes were slow, generational, but they were real. The old hatreds did not disappear overnight, but they began to erode, worn away by the simple fact of people choosing love over fear. Aiden and Grisha expanded their farm, hiring help from both communities and paying fair wages to all. Their home became a gathering place, a neutral ground where humans and orcs could meet and trade and slowly learn to see each other as people rather than monsters. It was not always easy. There were setbacks, moments of violence and misunderstanding that threatened to undo all their progress. But they persevered. Together, on their 10th anniversary, they stood in the same spot where they had been married, now surrounded by a small crowd of friends and family, both human and orc. Hope played nearby with other children, her laughter ringing out across the valley. Nara had come for the celebration, now a full shaman with authority in her clan. She had brought word that the chief who had driven Grisha away was dead, and the new leadership was more open to peace. "You should return," Nara said to her sister. "The clan wants you back. They speak of you as a hero, as the one who had the courage to leave when no one else would." Grisha looked at Aiden, a question in her eyes. He knew what she was asking. Would he go with her if she chose to return to her people? But she surprised him. "This is my home," she said firmly. "These are my people now, all of them, human and orc alike. I will visit gladly. But my place is here with my husband and my daughter, building the future we have dreamed of." Relief and love flooded through Aiden in equal measure. He pulled her close, this woman who had appeared out of a storm and changed his life forever. "I love you," he said, "not for the first time and certainly not for the last." "I love you too," Grisha replied, her arms strong around him. "My strange, wonderful human, my husband, my home." They kissed as the sun set over the valley, the same valley where a tornado had once torn across the fields, where a man had pulled an orc woman into his root cellar just in time, where two impossible people had built an impossible life together. And all around them, the community they had created celebrated, humans and orcs mingling freely, sharing food and stories and hope for a better future. It was not perfect. There would be more challenges ahead, more obstacles to overcome, more prejudice to fight. But standing there in Grisha's arms, surrounded by friends and family, Aiden knew that they would face it all together. They had survived a tornado, survived prejudice and hatred, survived every attempt to tear them apart. They would survive whatever came next. And they would do it together as they had always done. One day at a time, one act of kindness at a time, one choice to love instead of hate at a time. They would build the world they wanted to see, brick by brick, hand in hand, until the impossible became simply the way things were. Hope's laughter rang out again, pure and joyful, and Aiden thought about how appropriate her name was. She was their hope, yes, but more than that. She was proof that hope was justified, that the future could be better than the past, that love could triumph over division if people were brave enough to reach for it. The celebration continued into the night, fires burning bright against the darkness, music and laughter filling the air. And when Aiden and Grisha finally retreated to their home, their daughter asleep between them, they lay in the darkness and talked about their dreams for the future. "More children," Grisha said softly. "I want more children. I want a house full of laughter and chaos and love." "Yes," Aiden agreed. "And I want to expand the farm, hire more people, create more opportunities for mixed families. I want this valley to be a beacon, a place where anyone can come and be accepted for who they are." "Ambitious," Grisha said, but there was warmth in her voice. "I learned from the best," Aiden replied, and she laughed quietly. They fell silent, each lost in their own thoughts, but their hands remained intertwined. After all they had been through, after all they had built, the simple act of holding hands still felt like a miracle. Two people who should have been enemies, who should never have met, whose love should have been impossible, lying together in the darkness and dreaming of the future. The tornado that had brought them together had destroyed Aiden's old life, but in doing so, it had given him something infinitely better. A partner, a family, a purpose larger than himself. He had been a soldier, a farmer, a builder. But his most important role, the one that defined him more than any other, was husband to Grisha and father to Hope. "Thank you," he whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Grisha murmured, already half asleep. "For staying. For taking a chance on a strange human who did not know what he was asking for. For giving me a life worth living." Grisha squeezed his hand. "Thank you for pulling me into that cellar, for seeing me as a person rather than a monster, for loving me when the world said you should not." "Always," Aiden promised. "I will always love you." "And I will always love you," Grisha replied. They fell asleep like that, hands clasped, their daughter safe between them, and outside the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient dance. The valley was quiet now, the celebration over, but the change they had sparked would continue to grow. Other impossible loves would bloom. Other bridges would be built. Other children would be born who embodied hope for a better future. It would take time. Generations, perhaps. But change always took time. What mattered was that it had begun, started by a man and a woman who had chosen love over fear, who had built a life together despite every obstacle, who had proven that the impossible was simply what no one had been brave enough to attempt yet. As dawn broke over the valley, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Aiden woke to find Grisha already up, standing at the window and looking out over their land. Hope was awake too, babbling happily in her mother's arms, reaching for the light. "Good morning," Aiden said, joining them at the window. "Good morning, husband," Grisha replied, leaning into him. "Look, a beautiful day." It was. The fields were green with growing crops. The barn stood strong and sturdy. The house they had built together sheltered them from wind and rain. And all around, in every direction, was the evidence of their labor and their love. "Yes," Aiden agreed, wrapping his arms around his wife and daughter. "A beautiful day, and tomorrow will be even better." Grisha smiled, that rare, radiant smile that still took his breath away. "Tomorrow will be even better," she agreed, "because we will build it together." And they did. Day after day, year after year, they built their future together. They had more children, 3 in total, each one a unique blend of both parents, each one loved fiercely and completely. They expanded their farm into a thriving community, a place where anyone was welcome regardless of species or background. They weathered storms, both literal and metaphorical, faced down prejudice and violence, and emerged stronger each time. Their story became legend in the valley. The human man and the orc woman who had defied convention to build a life together. The family that had proven love could transcend the boundaries people drew. The community that had shown a better way was possible. And it all started with a tornado that tore across the valley, with a man who pulled an orc woman into his root cellar just in time, with 2 people who chose to see each other's humanity when the world told them to see only enemies. They lived long lives, Aiden and Grisha, surrounded by children and grandchildren, respected by both their peoples, remembered as the ones who had started the change. And when they finally passed, within days of each other, as if they could not bear to be apart even in death, they were buried together on the hill overlooking their valley, in the soil they had tended together for so many years. Their grave became a place of pilgrimage, a symbol of what was possible when people chose love over hate. And standing beside it, growing strong and tall, was a tree that hope had planted on the day they died. It grew from 2 seeds, one from an orcish sacred grove and one from a human apple orchard, its roots intertwined beneath the earth, its branches reaching toward the sky together, just like the love that had started it all. Impossible, beautiful, enduring, and ultimately triumphant.